In the early 1990s, the United States Air Force lined up 365 B-52 Stratofortress bombers in the Arizona desert and systematically destroyed them not with explosives, not with crushing machines, but with a 13,000-pound steel guillotine specifically designed to slice through bomber fuselages. Each cut took 4 days. Each bomber represented $85 million in military capability. The total destruction exceeded $30 billion in combat aircraft. These weren't obsolete planes ready for retirement. Many had recently returned from combat operations in Desert Storm. Some had just received multi-million-dollar upgrades, yet military personnel methodically cut them into pieces, leaving the severed aircraft sitting in the desert for Russian satellites to photograph and verify. Why would America destroy its own strategic bomber fleet at the height of its military dominance? The answer reveals one of the most dramatic arms reduction operations in history and a calculated gamble that shaped modern nuclear deterrence. To understand why America destroyed these bombers, we need to examine what the B-52 represented to Soviet war planners. Since 1955, the Stratofortress defined American nuclear capability. 8 turbofan engines generating 136,000 pounds of thrust, combat radius exceeding 4,000 miles without refueling, payload capacity of 70,000 pounds of conventional or nuclear weapons. But the most terrifying capability wasn't the bomber itself, it was the AGM-86B air-launched cruise missile it carried. Each B-52G could carry 20 cruise missiles. Each missile contained a W-80 nuclear warhead with 150 kiloton yield, 10 times the power of Hiroshima. The missiles could fly 1,500 miles from launch point, terrain following at 500 feet altitude to evade radar detection. A single B-52 could theoretically destroy 20 cities without ever entering enemy airspace. The Soviet Union calculated that America's B-52 fleet could launch over 3,000 nuclear cruise missiles in a first strike scenario. By 1991, the United States operated 744 B-52 bombers. The oldest B-52G models dated from 1959, but continuous upgrades kept them lethal. New navigation systems, electronic countermeasures, and weapons integration made even the oldest bombers effective cruise missile platforms. The Air Force planned to operate these aircraft through 2040. Then suddenly, everything changed. On July 31, 1991, President George H.W. Bush and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev signed the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty in Moscow. START represented the most ambitious nuclear arms reduction in history. Both nations agreed to reduce strategic nuclear weapons by approximately 35%. But buried in the treaty's 700 pages was a provision that would doom hundreds of B-52s. The treaty limited each nation to 1,600 strategic nuclear delivery vehicles. This included intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and heavy bombers. For bombers, the counting rules created an unexpected problem. Any bomber capable of carrying long-range cruise missiles counted as 10 warheads regardless of actual payload. One B-52 carrying conventional bombs counted the same as one carrying 20 nuclear cruise missiles. The mathematics forced an impossible choice. Keep the B-52 fleet and sacrifice land-based missiles, or eliminate bombers to preserve the missile force. The Air Force chose a middle path. Destroy the oldest B-52G models while keeping newer B-52H variants. But the treaty required more than simple retirement. It demanded visible, verifiable destruction that Russian satellites could confirm. Article 11 of the treaty specified exact destruction methods. Simply parking bombers in the desert wasn't sufficient. The aircraft had to be rendered permanently inoperable through specific procedures. Wings could be separated from fuselages. Tail sections could be removed. But the most dramatic option involved cutting the fuselage in half, literally breaking the bomber's back to prevent any possibility of regeneration. The destruction operation began at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, home to the Aerospace Maintenance and Regeneration Group. The same facility that stored aircraft for potential return to service now faced the task of permanent elimination. Engineers designed a massive guillotine specifically for B-52 destruction. The device weighed 13,000 pounds and used a steel blade capable of slicing through the bomber's aluminum fuselage, structural frames, control cables, and hydraulic lines. The process required extraordinary precision. Treaty requirements specified that cuts must sever the fuselage completely while leaving enough structure for satellite verification. Too much destruction would prevent Russian confirmation. Too little might suggest the aircraft could be repaired. Each bomber was positioned precisely under the guillotine. Crews removed classified equipment, engines, and usable components before destruction. Then, the blade dropped. The first cut began on September 28, 1992. Bomber 58-0201, a B-52G that had served since 1959, was positioned under the guillotine. The cutting process took 4 days of continuous work. The blade didn't simply chop through the aircraft, it slowly sawed through the structure to ensure clean separation. When complete, the bomber sat in 2 pieces, its broken fuselage testament to treaty compliance. The emotional impact on Air Force personnel was profound. Maintenance crews who had spent careers keeping these bombers operational now participated in their destruction. Pilots who had flown these aircraft in combat watched them being cut apart. One crew chief described it as watching them execute your best friend. These weren't just machines, they represented American air power projection for 4 decades. The treaty required that destroyed bombers remain visible for 90 days after elimination. Russian satellites passed overhead every 93 minutes, photographing the growing collection of severed aircraft. The imagery provided verification that America was meeting treaty obligations. But the desert display also sent an unintended message about American military waste. Congressmen began questioning the wisdom of destroying billions in military assets. Each B-52G contained approximately 1,000 ounces of silver in its electrical systems. The engines retained significant value for parts and materials. The aluminum airframe could be recycled. Critics calculated that proper salvage operations could recover $200 million in materials from the destroyed fleet. Instead, the bombers sat in pieces, slowly oxidizing in the desert sun. The Air Force defended the destruction as necessary for strategic arms reduction. Keeping the bombers would have required eliminating 365 Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missiles. Instead, the land-based missiles provided faster response time and required less maintenance than aging bombers. From a strategic perspective, sacrificing old B-52Gs to preserve modern missiles made military sense. But the optics of destroying functional bombers troubled both military leadership and taxpayers. The pace of destruction accelerated through 1993 and 1994. At peak operations, the Guillotine destroyed 1 bomber every 2 weeks. The desert filled with bisected aircraft arranged in neat rows. By treaty deadline, 365 B-52G bombers had been eliminated. The operation succeeded in meeting START requirements, but questions remained about the wisdom of permanent destruction versus preservation. Some Air Force strategists argued for keeping the bombers in recoverable storage. The treaty allowed for elimination through wing removal or other reversible methods. These aircraft could theoretically return to service if global threats changed, but political leadership wanted clear demonstration of arms reduction commitment. The guillotine cuts provided undeniable proof of permanent elimination. The irony became apparent years later. By 2001, the Air Force faced bomber shortfalls for operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. The service requested funds to upgrade remaining B-52H bombers for conventional missions. Some of the destroyed B-52Gs could have served these roles if preserved differently. The permanent elimination removed future flexibility for conventional operations. Russia's treaty compliance proved equally complex. The Soviet Union agreed to destroy hundreds of Tu-95 Bear and Tu-160 Blackjack bombers. But economic collapse slowed Russian elimination efforts. Many Russian bombers simply deteriorated from neglect rather than formal destruction. American satellites observed rows of strategic bombers slowly disintegrating at Russian bases, achieving treaty compliance through abandonment rather than active elimination. The technical details of the Guillotine operation revealed surprising engineering challenges. The B-52's structure included multiple aluminum alloy compositions with different cutting characteristics. The main fuselage used 2024 T3 aluminum with high strength. The structural frames contained 7075 T6 aluminum, significantly harder and more resistant to cutting. The Guillotine blade required specific geometry to handle these variations. Engineers calculated optimal cutting angles to minimize blade wear while ensuring clean separation. Too steep an angle would bind the blade in thick structural members. Too shallow would require excessive cutting length. The final design used a 15-degree blade angle with carbide-tipped teeth for durability. Each blade could destroy approximately 20 bombers before requiring replacement. The cutting location mattered strategically. Treaty specifications required severing the fuselage between specific frame stations to ensure permanent disability. The cut had to separate the wing attachment points from the tail section while leaving enough structure for satellite identification. Engineers marked each bomber with precise cutting guides to ensure compliance. The economic impact extended beyond direct destruction costs. Each B-52G supported approximately 100 maintenance personnel, dozens of aircrew members, and extensive support infrastructure. Base closures followed bomber elimination. Entire communities built around B-52 operations faced economic disruption. The human cost of strategic arms reduction often exceeded the value of destroyed equipment. Pilot training programs adapted to reduced bomber inventory. The Air Force consolidated B-52 operations at fewer bases with smaller total fleet size. Training syllabi changed to emphasize conventional operations over nuclear mission profiles. The cultural shift from nuclear deterrence to conventional strike affected doctrine, tactics, and institutional knowledge. The spare parts impact proved particularly significant. B-52G and B-52H models shared many components despite different designations. The destroyed G models contained millions in spare parts that could support H model operations. Instead of harvesting these components, treaty compliance required complete aircraft destruction. The Air Force later spent hundreds of millions manufacturing parts that existed in the destroyed bombers. International observers monitored the destruction process. START treaty provisions allowed Russian inspectors to verify elimination procedures. These visits created surreal scenes of former adversaries jointly confirming weapon destruction. Russian colonels who had spent careers planning to stop B-52s now verified their elimination. The collaborative verification process built confidence but highlighted the strange reality of destroying functional military capability. By December 1994, the destruction operation was complete. The 365th B-52G sat severed in the Arizona desert, its elimination marking the end of an era. The Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty achieved its goal of reducing nuclear delivery vehicles. But the method, physically destroying billions in military assets, raised questions that persist today. Modern arms control agreements learned from START's destruction requirements. New treaties emphasize conversion over elimination, allowing military assets to shift from nuclear to conventional roles. The new START Treaty, signed in 2010, permits bomber conversion rather than destruction. This flexibility preserves military investment while achieving arms reduction goals. The guillotined B-52s remain visible in satellite imagery today. Their severed fuselages serve as monuments to arms control success and warnings about permanent elimination costs. Some aircraft have been moved to museums, their bisected structures explaining treaty compliance to visitors. Others slowly deteriorate in the desert, their aluminum gradually returning to oxide form. The total cost of B-52 destruction exceeded $1 billion when including personnel, equipment, environmental cleanup, and opportunity costs. The $30 billion in destroyed aircraft value represents only the acquisition price. Operational investments, upgrades, and maintenance over decades multiplied the actual loss. Yet this destruction helped end the Cold War arms race and reduced global nuclear weapons by thousands. So why did America cut 365 B-52 bombers in half with a guillotine? Because treaty compliance demanded visible, verifiable, permanent elimination that satellites could confirm. Because keeping old bombers would have required sacrificing modern missiles that provided superior deterrence. Because demonstrating commitment to arms reduction mattered more than preserving military assets. The guillotine cuts weren't just destroying aircraft, they were severing connections to Cold War nuclear brinksmanship. The operation succeeded in its strategic goals while highlighting the complexity of arms control verification. Today's military planners study the B-52 destruction as a lesson in treaty implementation. The images of severed bombers in the desert remind us that reducing military tensions sometimes requires destroying the very weapons that maintained peace. What aspect of this destruction operation surprised you most? The guillotine engineering, the treaty verification requirements, or the economic impact of eliminating functional bombers? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to understand more hidden stories of military aviation operations and strategic decisions, subscribe to Flight Deck. We decode the engineering, tactics, and policy decisions that shape modern air power. Until next time, remember that some of the most important military operations involve destroying our own weapons to prevent their use.